Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show, unshaved, unbathed, unedited, and unscripted. Today we're going to talk about the big thumb of oppression that seems to be hovering over our heads. I'm going to start with an article by Hedges, and it's about the colonization of all of us by corporations. And he's talking about a guy named Robert E. Gamer and his book, The Developing Nations, and specifically the chapter called Why Men Do Not Revolt. And what he talks about that intrigues me the most, what Chris Hedges mentions of Gamer, is that we have been, like nations on the periphery of empire, colonized. So you know what it's like to be colonized if you're like the United States was in its infancy, but we individual people have been colonized. We are controlled by tiny corporate entities that have no loyalty to the nation, and indeed, in the language of traditional patriotism, are traitors. He's speaking of transnational corporations. They strip us of our resources, keep us politically passive, and enrich themselves at our expense. The mechanisms of control are familiar to those whom the Martinique-born French psychiatrist and writer Frantz Fanon called the wretched of the earth, including African Americans. The colonized are denied job security, incomes are reduced to subsistence level, the poor are plunged into desperation, mass movements such as labor unions are dismantled. The school system is degraded so only the elites have access to a superior education. Laws are written to legalize corporate plunder and abuse, as well as criminalize dissent, which is where we're going to be going in a few minutes. And the ensuing fear and instability, keenly felt this past weekend by more than 200,000 Americans who lost their unemployment benefits, ensure political passivity by diverting all personal energy toward survival. It is an old game. We're so busy, we're so dissatisfied, we just don't have time to think about it. George Carlin, again, he has said it well. I'll just refer you to that because I don't want to spend every episode talking about what he said, but he sure has nailed it. Farther down in this article, it says, we must accept that we have no effective voice in the way we are governed. We must accept the hollowness of electoral politics, the futility of our political theater, and we must destroy the corporate structure itself. Yesterday, I made the argument that Elizabeth Warren is not going to do any of these things. She's so deeply entrenched in this system that she just wants to tweak it, which is another way of saying incrementalism, and that she's just a less, I'd say less out in the open version of Hillary Clinton. But that was yesterday. Now, let's go on here. The danger the corporate state faces does not come from the poor. That's an interesting point. I just want to touch on that and then go towards that big thumb I was talking about earlier. Those poor, the ones Karl Marx dismissed as the lumpen proletariat, do not mount revolutions, although they join them, and often become cannon fodder. The real danger to the elite comes from déclassé intellectuals, those educated middle-class men and women who are barred by a calcified system from advancement. Artists without studios or theaters, teachers without classrooms, lawyers without clients, doctors without patients, and journalists without newspapers descend economically. They become, as they mingle with the underclass, a bridge between the worlds of the elite and the oppressed, and they are the dynamite that triggers revolt. And he goes on to talk about the Occupy movement and other ways that we're being held down in ways that can't last. Here's an example of what Chris was talking about from Renegade, A World of Bullshit Jobs.
Globally, something has gone badly wrong with our jobs. Less than 15% of people are feeling happy and engaged at work, while 23% of people are actively disengaged, and they're twice as likely to suffer from stress or anger-related incidents. This week we took the show on the road to talk about this silent workplace epidemic with the anthropologist and writer David Graeber. His new book has touched a nerve globally, uniting disenfranchised workers around the idea of the profound damage caused when people work in a BS job.
That guy is shaved and bathed, but I really like his points. In an earlier, I'm not sure of the chronology, but an earlier episode of Renegade, they had two German economists on, and they talked about how would you say it? They talked about how we are being pushed. I think the best way to lead into it is when they talked about Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan saying that markets in our political system, earlier than that, but especially starting in the 80s, our markets have taken precedence over our individual lives. And so with that as foreground, you see how important this idea that people are not happy in their jobs. And the reason is that corporate rule, the bean counters in education, for example, and in all of industry, the bean counters are ruling us. They don't care if we're happy in our work. They don't care if we're fulfilled. And so then we have a world of bullshit jobs. Now, the next part is, how do they keep us swimming in this without rising up? The intellectuals are starting to wake us up, and they're trying to tell us, hey, we need to start something here. What we're up against, the corporate message, the corporate bullshit that we're swimming in is brought to us courtesy of corporate media. And so the next two clips are about how the media system works to keep dissident voices out. So this first one we're talking about, well, both of these we're talking about Tulsi Gabbard, because she has been the most blatant example of smearing and the corporatocracy being afraid and doing whatever they can do to keep her out. This is what the DNC told Tulsi Gabbard when she decided to drop out of her position with the DNC and to endorse Bernie Sanders. This is an email that came about because of WikiLeaks.
A lot more actually. And it all started with that email that a lot of you are familiar with that came down the pipe when the WikiLeaks emails dropped. Remember Darnell Strom was sent in regards to Tulsi Gabbard resigning from the vice chair position to endorse Bernie. And the email read, Representative Gabbard, we were very disappointed to hear that you would resign your position with the DNC so you could endorse Bernie Sanders, a man.
When people say they're so disappointed, I'm in my own life, I'm always willing to say that is the key sign that you're dealing with a sociopath. Sociopaths say, I'm so disappointed. Think about the mom in the movie Tangled, and that's how she operates. She's the most evil literary character I can think of right now. And so these people that are so disappointed in Tulsi, they're right there with her in my book.
And who has never been a Democrat before. When we met over dinner a couple of years ago, I was so impressed by your intellect, your passion, and your commitment to getting things done on behalf of the American people. For you to endorse a man who has spent almost 40 years in public office with very little accomplishments, by the way, that's a lie. His nickname is the Amendment King. It doesn't fall in line with what we previously thought of you. Hillary Clinton will be our party's nominee.
Hillary Clinton.
This is in February of 2016.
Did you hear that? Hillary Clinton will be our party's nominee. That's what they said in February. I said yesterday that I think they're already having emails like that. We haven't had them leaked to us yet, but I think they're already saying that Elizabeth Warren is our party's nominee. I'm seeing the writing on the wall. That was my prediction yesterday.
There had been like one primary at this point.
Yes.
If even. And they're letting you know that the fix was in.
The fix is in.
And standing on ceremony to support the sinking Bernie Sanders ship is disrespectful to Hillary Clinton, a woman who has spent the vast majority of her life in public service working on behalf of women, families, and the underserved. There's no way they mean that.
But they do. And so then he goes on to talk about Anna Kasparian and Emma Vigeland on the Young Turks. And it's pretty easy to connect the dots and to see how they're doing the same thing to Tulsi as has been done in the past to Bernie. And in a previous episode, I've traced the Clinton machinery money directly to Cenk Uygur. And so you can follow the money trail, and you can see that the Young Turks are, it's clear to me, they're in the bag for the DNC. And you can tell by what they're doing. Here's another, this is Lee Camp. He's talking about the same topic, but then he goes on and talks about the bigger problem of not just Twitter, but other Google and Facebook and other platforms that are trying to give us their own candidates and definitely trying to thwart democracy. It's interesting that two of these clips are from RT, and under these YouTubes from RT it says, and here's an example really of Big Brother and that big thumb. It says RT is funded in whole or in part by the Russian government. So you've got these people that are, that happened to Ed Schultz. He was with RT after MSNBC fired him for trying to cover Bernie's announcement for the 2016 campaign. They fired him because he was daring to try to get the word out about Bernie Sanders. And so RT, I remember the first time I saw that announcement, is funded by the Russian government. That's terrible. But I'm starting to think maybe the Russian government likes us more than our own government does, because at least they want the word to get out. Both Ed Schultz and Lee Camp have said that they feel freedom on this platform to say exactly what they feel like saying. And it's pretty clear when you listen to Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore too, they're straight shooters. They don't seem to monitor or censor themselves much. And so I'm definitely persuaded that because you see these shows on RT, it doesn't mean that they're propaganda.
And here's the deeper problem. These tech platforms, and you guys have heard me talk about this in terms of my show, these tech platforms have a massive ability to shape our culture, to not let people see things they don't want them to see,
And that's what they accuse Russia of doing. They say Russia is meddling in our government. You know what Russia did? Russia is showing the American people how our own government is meddling in our affairs and hijacking our electoral process. I know I have been throttled on Twitter. My account has been suspended, and I'll go into how, but if you hear that, I promise you'll be shocked, because it's because I have the agenda of telling the truth about our rigged system. And obviously Lee does too. Look at his face there. Look at his eyebrows. He's trying to tell us that we're frogs cooking in a pot, and we better hop out pretty soon.
to shut down discussion, and this video right here is going to be suppressed in many ways on Facebook.
It only has 38 likes. It only has 288 views. And if you know Lee Camp, I don't know. He's got, well, he'll go on and explain it.
On YouTube, they just unsubscribe people on YouTube. On Facebook, I've been capped at 335,000 for the past 2.5 years, and now they're slowly purging people out of my Facebook page, Twitter. So they have their ways, and that's what's happening to Tulsi Gabbard, because they do not want what she's saying about the military-industrial complex to become a national discussion. And
what he said earlier in this video is that Twitter took Tulsi when people type Tulsi Gabbard into the search bar, instead of finding current news about her, current news articles, they popped up old article about, some smear thing about Assad, or you'll have to go back and watch the video. But instead of current news, they brought up some smear thing and put that at the top of the searches. They did that for 2.5 days, he said. Anytime you would search for Tulsi Gabbard, you would get propaganda instead of current news. What they didn't want was for her recent popularity to be visible to the American people. Twitter is a big corporation. Twitter is like a news outlet for people. And so for them to meddle in our elections that way, I think it's traitorous. It's treason. And so we should be holding Twitter accountable.
We have to, it's on us to move that discussion, to force your friends, your enemies, your fucking everybody. I don't give a shit if it's your grandpa that you fucking hate, your uncle or some shit. We have to move this discussion, sit them down and talk about this stuff. Talk about why we should be at war at all, because we shouldn't. We shouldn't be at war at all. We shouldn't be bombing at all. Instead, we're dropping a bomb every 12 minutes, and it was practically the same under Obama. And, I could call this a tangent in a video about Tulsi Gabbard, but in fact, I think this is the deeper issue. So I brought up this to get to this, and I think we have to keep standing up against these platforms. We have to create platforms that are competitive to them. Some do exist, but they're not, that big so far. I think you got to keep building them. Minds is one of them, but I don't think we should just be like, oh yeah, we have Minds, and just...
So he goes on to talk about ways to go around the system. I think the best way to go around the system is to abolish it. I think Bernie's right. We need a voter revolution. We need to break things down. The difference between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren is that she is tweaking. She wants to tweak the system, and Bernie wants to take it down and start over in a democratic way. He wants to give the American people a government that they democratically choose, and that's not going on now. Right now we have a corporatocracy run by oligarchs, and we need to wake up. So before we can do these suggestions and really make them stick, because the what'll happen is these alternative platforms that Lee is talking about, they'll just get hijacked the same way. I remember when YouTube seemed to be very democratic. I remember when Twitter seemed to be very democratic. It seemed to be a way to go around the corporations. But then the corporations, they move in and they take them over. They buy them, and then they influence them. So we have to stop the root of the systemic problem. We have to get to the bottom of the problem. And Bernie relentlessly tells us what we have to do. We have to put down the mighty from their seats. We have to send the rich away empty. We have to get rid of sorry, but George said it right. The rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about you. We have to get to the bottom of the problem. Well, I'm still unshaved, unbathed, obviously uncouth. Please share this. Please subscribe to this channel, because Lee's right. We have to do something to go around the powers. Have a good one.